This is Gemara Shavuos, Daf Zayin, and we're holding on Vav Amid Beis, approximately 20 lines from the bottom. Omar le Rapapa le Abaye. We just finished with Shavar Malka v'Caesar v'Kaisar. Says the Gemara, Rapapa comments to Abaye, hey, Minayu Odif, which is greater, Shavar Malka or Caesar? Omar le. Do you eat in the forest? Go see which one has more authority. The pasuk says, "V'seichol kol ara usadushina v'sadkina." Says the pasuk, "Will devour the whole earth and break it into pieces." Amar Rav Yechanan, Zu roimi chayeves shetiva. The wicked Rome, Shetiva Yatza B'chol Olam Kulai, whose authority spreads throughout the entire world. Says the Gemara, Ravina Amar, no, Kum Kalima Damar Uschake Sadina, Tekisna Uschake, says Ravina, the Rabbanan is like a new woolen garment and a worn out woolen garment. Sadina Tekisna, the new white linen garment and a worn out linen garment. And that ends the comparisons between each of them. Says the Gemara, quoting the next part of the Mishnah, as Yeshua Yediyah B'Tchila, the Mishnah taught us that the Yediyah B'Tchila, the Yediyah B'Saif, the Helen B'Intayim, then what is the Chayiv Karban Oile V'Yorid? Tana Rabbanan, says the Gemara, Minayin Sheina Kosim Idaber. How do we know the pasuk is not referring to El B'Tumas Mikdash U'Kedashav? B'Dinu, says the Gemara Kal V'Chaimer. Hayel V'Zahir V'Anesh Al Tuma. There's a warning, and the Torah tells us the Einesh for a case of Tuma V'Chayiv Karban Ala Tuma, and as well there's a Karban for a case of Tuma. Ma Kishes V'Anesh Al Tuma Laser. Says the Gemara, just like when someone is warned and the Einesh is listed for Tuma, yet Lo Yisir V'Anash Al Tumas Mikdash V'Kedashav. There's no Azhara, there's no Einesh for Tumas Mikdash V'Kedashav. So too, Av K'Shechayiv Karban Al Tuma, Lo Chayiv Elo Al Tumas Mikdash V'Kedashav. Says Gemara, wait, but how do you know that's the Kal V'Chaimer Ve'ima Truma? But perhaps the Torah is talking about someone who's telling me that he's Truma Shehizir V'Anash, in which the Torah warns him, and there's a punishment. Says Gemara, no, Lo Ashchan Avon Misa T'Chayiv Alei Karban. We can't have any case where there'll be a case that there'll be Misa B'dei Shemayim, which is when one eats when one eats truma b'tuma, that when it's a shoygeg, you're chayiv a carbon oil v'yored. Says Gemara, they can't be. Says Gemara, but wait, emahani really carbon kavua, maybe refers that's only by a carbon kavua. Avol, as we turn over to Zayin Amid Aleph, says the Gemara, maybe it only makes sense that any time there's a real potential chiyuv misa b'dei shemayim, it can't bring a carbon. It's only for a full-fledged carbon. But a carbon oilev yared, maybe we'll say nasi. Maybe in a chanami you would yes have to bring. Why? Midave hashmias kol va'abito isifasayim. Just like in the case of someone hears a shavua, and someone who says a shvua, that is the halacha. We look at Rashi for a quick moment. The top Rashi says, shvua sa'idos or shvua b'itoi, tisnayu nami v'karban oila v'yorid, and v'inayin shal zadoinu like misav lo karis. So Amar Kra says the Gemara, no, ba lemute truma, that comes to exclude truma, that if someone is tamei v'chay the karban oila v'yorid. Ask the Gemara, mikdash, no, maybe it comes to exclude that if someone walked into the Beis Hamikdash when he's tamei, that what? There will not be a carbon oile v'yorid. Demaisi carbon. Why? Because you're not going to get a kapara until you bring a full-fledged carbon. Chatos, says the Gemara, carbon kavua. Kari Rav Ale de Rebbe, Doila, Mayim, Ibayre Samukim. Rebbe says, Rava, says about Rebbe that Doila Mayim, he draws out water, Ibayre Samukim, from deep wells. Titania, Rebbe Omer teaches Rebbe, Ekra Ani Chaya. The pasuk could have said Chaya, Behema Lamali, Nemra, Lehema Lamani Nemra. So Nemra Kan, Behema Tamea, Venemra Lahala, and Behema Tamea. Mahalan Thomas Koidesh, Avkan Thomas Koidesh. Says Gemara, okay, very good about Ashkan, Thomas Koidesh. The item itself, but Thomas Mikdash. How do we know about going into the base of Mikdash Minalan? Amar Cross says the Basik, B'chol Koidesh Leisiga, V'ala Mikdash Leisavu. So what do we see? What's the heckish? Is Kish Mikdash Lekoidesh. The two are equated to each other. Says Gemara, but wait, if that is true, Iachi Chuma Nami, Damar Mar B'chol Koidesh Leisiga, the rabbi said Chuma. Says the Gemara, very nice thought, but Hamir Rachmana Ba, the Torah excludes it with Ba. Ema Ba Lemute Mikdash. Says the Gemara, Mistavra Mikdash Lamimantina, and why? Shekain Bekaris Kamaisa. Because there's karis potentially. Says the Gemara, wait, Adarabba. Chuma Lamimantina, and why? Shekain Achila Kamaisa. Ela Amar Rava. So says the Gemara, you know what? Says the Gemara, we need to have a new makar. That is a carbon oil of Yared. If you go into the Beis Hamikdash while you are tamei. Ela Amar Rava, about 20 lines down. First word of line is Amar Rava Shalosh Krisis. Teaches Rava there are 3 times the Torah says Kares Bishlamim. Lama, for what reason? Achas leklal, ve'achas leprat, ve'achas letuma. Says the Gemara, 1 for each. Haksuva, achas letuma, haksuva b'Torah. Stam. Ve'ini yodeya mai. And I don't know, says the Gemara, what this means. Mahi havi oimer tumas kodesh. Comes on the pasuk. It's about tuma of the food. Tumas kodesh. We already know about tumas kodesh from Rishitas Rebbe. So says the Gemara, you know what? Teniu inye in the tumas mikdash. That's how we're going to learn that you can't go into the Beis Hamikdash while tamei. And if you do, you chayiv the carbon oil of the yored. Ask Gemara, wait, v'mivaylech l'Ravavua. Tamar Ravavua shalosh krisas bishlamim. Lama achas lekav achas l'brav achas l'dvarim she'ina ne'achol. And he needs a separate krisos for any time you have a carbon that is not eaten. Says the Gemara, but and l'Rav Shimon damar darim she'ina ne'acholin. Ein chayav alav kares v'sham tama lasi chatas. Habenim. Comes to include the chaz habenim. I would have thought. Oh, Yavam Rav Shimon Kol Sheino Karev Al Mizveach Achitzon Kishlamim Ein Chayavin Allah Misham Pigol Misham Tama Nami Lo. I would think this just like there's no Pigol. I would think that there's no Tama. Tama Nami Lo Kamashalon Nemechayiv. So that's the Chiddush that you are indeed Chayiv. But if that is going to be the case, says the Gemara, once we need the psukim to teach us the din of Rav Avua, we no longer have the extra psukim to teach us about entering into the Beis Hamikdash while tamei. Says the Gemara, another attempt. Ela Amar Nahardai Mishrei Derava Shalshumas Bishlamim Lama Achas Lekavach Zabravach Zatoma Aksuva Batayr Stam Venu Deamai. Have you heard Thomas Kodesh? Vimin in the Thomas Kodesh. We already learned that. Teoin the Thomas Mikdash. I vaynami baile. I di. To buy the of Karis Ravua. Kosam nami. Toma delosagi be belav. Excuse me. So on that one more time. The main is about Kodesh Nafdim the Rabbi Tinu the Kumas Mikdash. I nami mi baile. We also need it for Ravua. I did buy the Mikdav. Karis the Ravua, just like the Torah writes kares 3 times for Avavua, Katsanami Tuma. Also writes Tuma 3 times, because it would be insufficient without that. Elamai Rava, so says the Gemara, you're right. A new mikar for going to the Samikdash Tami, you bring Karban Levi Ayrit. Asya Tomasai Tomasai. Ksir Shava. Ksiv Achalachol Tomasai. Uksiv, as we turn over to Zayin and Mebei, says the Gemara. Ksiv Asam, and over there it says Tamiyeh Oid Tomasa Bai. What do we learn out? Malal Tomas Mikdash, Afkan Tomas Mikdash. Ask Gemara about Labal Amali. The Rabbi said, Saif Tar. Ha Amre Ba Miyata. Umisham Nimiyata. Aisir Ksiv. Oiki Yaga Davar Negia. In the Lavar Negia, Loi. Ksiv Ba Miuta. Avim Miyad Achar Miyad. And therefore, what? Vein Miyad Achar Miyad Ella. Le Rabbis. Continues the Gemara by quoting the next part of the Mishnah. Yashav Etzchila Vein Ba Yediyah B'Saif. Then the Sayer, Hanasa Bifnim, the Sayer that is brought inside, is that which is going to give him the kapara. Yom Kippur will hold back the punishment, and then the Karban Eilav Yored afterwards. Tana Rabbanan, says the Gemara, V'chaber l'kodesh, mitomos b'nei Yisrael. For this passage we learn Yeshli b'nin zeh, lahavi shalosh tomos. From here we learn out 3 different tomos. Tomos avodah zarah, number 1. V'tomos gilui arayis, number 2. And number 3, v'tomos shvichas tamim, the 3 cardinal sins. B'avodah zarah omer l'manti tameis mikdashay b'gilui arayis hu omer shvartas shvatay levilti asay sichul kimatay v'yis v'gaymer lo shetamu bam b'shivcha chazdamu omer v'lo stamez aret. Yoch, everything I'll give more tomos halalu. I would think for these 3 tomos. Then what? Yesayer mechaber. That only for these 3, the Sar in Yom Kippur is mechaber. Therefore, Tamalim Mishem and Yisrael Veloi. Tamalim, excuse me, Yisrael. Chatayim Domia Du Peshayim. Mavsham Shinim Bnei Karban Av Chatayim. No, I skipped, excuse me. Go back. I apologize. One more time. Yachal Gimel Tuvas Ali Sayer Mechaber Tamalaymar Mitumas Bnei Yisrael V'loi May from the Tumah V'lo Kol Tumas Ma'amad Tziv Shachalik Asasa Mechlal Kol Tumas. Why do we see that the Pasuk makes a distinction from all Tumas? Have you Omer Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav Avkan Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav Shidas Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Aimer, mi mekaymai hu mocher, says Rabbi Shimon, no! Mi mekaymai, from it itself, the Tumah of the Sayer we learn, from the code we learn, Rabbi Aimer, v'chima ha'kodesh mitumas shel kodesh. That's going to be our makar, mitumas shel kodesh. We'll stop over here, I'll pick it up from here, v'siyata dishmaya.